How to handle deposits. I get this question quite often, and when you really think about it, it's a very simple answer. Um, Giving contractors deposits is one of the biggest mistakes that people make, and it's a completely understandable mistake. And I think even when I was new, I did it. I think from the most part, if we really just break down the belief systems that we've been given over the years, it's to give a third down to a contractor. It's the retail way of working with a contractor, and this is really standard when you work with a contractor for like to fix your home up or do a regular, and it's like a regular retail person working with a contractor. The third down is pretty standard, and that's how we do business, and they'll use that to buy materials. But if you consider the fact that when contractors work with commercial companies, they actually not only do they not get a deposit up front, but they usually get paid in 30 to 60 or 90 days net. So essentially, they do the work and then they put a bill in and they get paid that bill in 30 to 60 days. Now, that's completely different than giving people money up front. I mean, it's kind of night and day. But when you really think of it from the commercial standpoint, we are more like commercial than we are like a homeowner hiring a contractor. However, contractors like to treat us like homeowners and work with us that way. So they constantly will ask for deposits up front or money up front. So I never give deposits, and I tend to work with people in a way where, I don't obviously try to hire them for a 50K job. I'll hire them for small line items, and if there's materials that need to be bought, I can take a phone call and pay for them. This way, I'm not giving big deposits. I'm not doing any of those things. Now, with that being said, I'm not 100% that sometimes I'll give small deposits, but I always really want to minimize my risk is the key. Every time I've ever had a bad problem with a contractor, it's usually meant the contractor has gotten more money from me than work they've done. And when that's the case, they tend to go where the money is. So there might be a situation where somebody new is giving them the deposit, and now they've blown through my deposit and did a little bit of work, and just didn't do enough to cover the money they were already given. And now someone new wants to give them the big juicy deposit. So we never give that up front. That's really one of the first rules. And you're going to get a lot of contractors to give you, a little. They're going to fight back with you a little bit on this. But anyone who thinks like a subcontractor is used to not being paid up front, you get paid when you do the work. So one of the qualifying factors is if somebody wants a deposit up front, there's a good chance that that person's not used to working with like wholesale people. They're used to working with retail people, which means their pricing is going to be very retail, and the quality of their work, they're going to expect a lot and want you to pay a lot of money. And we don't want that. We want someone who understands the pricing that we have, understands, and can make a living with the pricing we have, and does not need to put us or them in a very risky situation. If absolutely necessary, you can pay for the work the day it's completed. So that is another way that I handle when people are like, well, we have to have money, this and that. If you keep the job really small, most jobs will be 1 or 2 days long. So they're not really going to be out of pocket very much money. And, they're not going to pay their guys every day. So it's easy to say, hey, listen, when you finish, I'll meet you at the job with a check and pay you instantly. That way you're not waiting. And we might do that on 1 or 2 of the first jobs we do with them, small jobs. And then from there, we get them on a once a week pay where they submit an invoice for the line items they've completed. We have someone check the line items, and then we pay them a check. And this keeps everything really simple. And we always use the line, and I've used this script before, and the script might go something along the lines of like, hey, most guys that are commercial renovators like me usually pay on like a 30-day net, meaning you do the work and you get paid in 30 days. The good news, what most people love about me, is that I'm going to pay you instantly as soon as you're done. And you don't have to wait at all. Isn't that great? And when I say, isn't that great, then they usually say, oh, yeah, that's great. And they're really happy that they're not waiting for the money 30 days. So, like, getting it, like, when you're done actually sounds really reasonable. Now, the only people that won't agree with this is the people who just want to get ahead of you and want to use your money to pay their bills. And if you really think about it, the worst person to give your money to as a contractor, they're not known as money managers. You give your money to the bank or someone who specializes in managing money, not a contractor. So the last thing we need is them taking our money and we have to worry that they're going to do all the right stuff with it. So contractors aren't great at managing and doing the right things with their money for the most part. So we understand that, and we don't want to put ourselves or put them in a position where they have to manage a bunch of money from us. So it's smart not to do any deposits and really minimize your risk on that. Make it possible for the contractor, make sure that it's not possible for the contractor to get ahead of you. So one game that a lot of contractors play, and they've done it to some of my students, and we've quickly assessed that that's what they were doing, and then we were able to kind of counteract that. You'll see sometimes when you hire a contractor to do 10 grand in work, and it's like maybe 10 different items, let's call it $1,000 each. What they like to do is they like to do 5 of the items at a time and get 5 items what they would perceive half done, and ask for $2,500 because they're like, we're half done, half the work, that's $2,500. The reality is, though, is they're only 35 or 40% done, and they want 50% of the money. And it's pretty tough when they've not completed the jobs to really argue what 50% represents. So, it's easy for them to get an additional 10 or 15%, and then they do another 30% work and ask for another 40% money, and it's like it goes on, and they get a little ahead of you every time they do a little bit of work because they're putting all the work together, and they're bunching the work together where it's really hard to manage and pay attention to that work. So it's very easy for them to just skim off the top, is what I call it. If they get a little bit from you each time they get a check from you, then next thing you know, in like a month or so, they've got a lot of money from you. Me and one of my students actually had this happen to us recently, where they did a really good job of just constantly getting a little extra. And next thing you know, they were about $3,000 or $4,000 ahead of us. And of course, we couldn't get them to finish work, and they stopped coming because the reality was the only way we were going to keep them around is if we kept paying them in advance and paying them more money than they've worked for. So we obviously couldn't do that. Once we realized we had done it, we had to fix it, and it's caused our relationship to break because of that. So whenever a contractor is collecting too much money, remember it's your responsibility not to pay them too much money, not just to protect yourselves, but also so you can keep them around. They don't want to manage your money. They're like a goldfish. If you drop a whole jar of food in the goldfish bowl, they'll eat until they die. And I feel like that's a great analogy for contractors. So your job is to give them a little bit of food every day, and make sure they eat properly and they don't end up overeating and killing themselves. Because we want them to work with us. We want them to be part of our team. Very important. But that's not going to happen if we create a work environment that's somewhat setting them up for failure.